This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
We'll bring you updates on the latest efforts to combat the coronavirus across Africa. And in our special coverage of the pandemic, we focus on the impact the crisis is having on the environment. And the leader of Libya's eastern-based National Army declares his forces will take over power in the North African nation. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first here's Uche Okoronkwo with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya's economy went up by 5.4% in 2019, missing a growth estimate. And we'll tell you why Moody's has downgraded South Africa's agricultural funder, the Land Bank. Of course, more on that are coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. Let's start with the latest on the COVID-19 in Africa. The number of coronavirus cases has risen by over 1,000 in the past 24 hours. The continent has so far recorded more than 33,000 cases with over 10,000 recoveries. Over 1,400 people have succumbed to the disease. Egypt and South Africa have the highest numbers recorded infections on the continent. They have reported over 4,700 cases each. Akufo-Addo, while the numbers are still rising though, some countries in Africa have begun easing restrictions. Some say the restrictions have come at a very heavy economic cost to citizens. Kenya says it will soon issue guidelines on the reopening of places of worship. It will also put Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camps on lockdown. In Ghana, economic activity has returned in some parts of the country after President Nana Akufo-Addo lifted a 3-week lockdown. Nigeria is set to gradually ease restrictions starting the 4th of May. The country's capital, Abuja, the commercial hub, Lagos, and southwestern state of Ogun have been on lockdown for the past month. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports.
Movement restrictions in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Schools, private and government organizations, and several other businesses all shut down since March 30. Movement's been restricted to only essential service workers. The Medical Association advised an extension of the lockdown as cases of COVID-19 continue to surge. But that decision doesn't sit right with many residents here.
I think it will curb it, but the way things are going, that everybody is a government of his own, providing water for themselves, electricity and food. My brother, it's not easy. Some people decide and prefer to die in the hands of COVID-19 than remain indoors and die there.
Nigeria have lost a lot. Individuals have lost a lot. How do you expect a common man to feed his family for this lockdown? So to me, I don't see anything extend or the economic of the country is shaking. We are not heading anywhere if we continue.
A large number of residents in the affected cities are daily wage earners whose source of livelihood have been completely cut off. Many are yet to access government palliatives designed to cushion the hard times of the lockdown.
Now we have been hearing about palliative, and a lot of persons are not benefiting from it. And this lockdown, a lot of hungers. If we decided to extend this time, I think this might lead to death, because hunger kills more than this virus. You cannot feed, you cannot take care of your home. A lot of people might decide to commit suicide.
Government, worried about the impact of the lockdown on the nation's economy, has now decided to relax measures by the 4th of May. Selected businesses would be open between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And an 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew would be in place. But the ban on interstate travels, social and religious gatherings still stands. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
The donation by Chinese billionaire Jack Ma to the Africa CDC has arrived in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. It is the third round of donations made by the foundation to the continent. The donation is expected to significantly impact Africa's battle against COVID-19. CGTN's Girum Chala reports.
The medical equipments aid by Chinese billionaire Jack Ma to Africa have continued arriving in the African continent, and the latest and the third round of this effort brought 61 tons of essential medical supplies.
Ethiopia is the hub of the African continent, and we are here working with the Jack Ma Foundation to play our role of saving lives across the continent. This supply has created an opportunity for us to firm up our collaboration with China and the rest of Africa in assuring unity against the coronavirus.
199,300 protective clothings, 300 ventilators, 708 thermometer guns, 28,500 medical gloves and 3,800 face shields are the exact number of different consignments brought straight from China to Addis Ababa. And we've been told the delivery of these medical supplies will be made to the rest of the continent soon.
The last round, medical supplies provided by Jack Ma Foundation were distributed within 6 days, unlike the planned 10 days. And this time too, we will make swift deliveries alongside the World Health Organization's medical supplies to the rest of the continent.
Jack Ma is expected to continue supporting Africa with a medical equipment provision, which is being executed under the initiative that involves Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Let's turn to Somalia now, where infections in the Horn of Africa nation continue to rise, with 480 confirmed cases and 26 deaths reported. Government agencies there have begun distributing protective gear as part of efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo has more from Mogadishu.
Health officials and security personnel are distributing reusable face masks to members of the public as part of government efforts to limit the spread of the coronavirus in the country. Samia Muhyiddin is one of several health workers leading the exercise. She takes time to explain to people in the capital, Mogadishu, why wearing a face mask is crucial to stopping the spread of the virus.
The masks we are distributing today are locally made, reusable, can be washed with hot water and reused time and time again. Our awareness campaign is simple. First, protect yourself and then protect others.
Those targeted by the initiative include public transport operators, rickshaw drivers and anyone seen on the streets without a face mask.
As a rickshaw driver, I meet with different people all the time. Some might have the virus and others might not have it. As a precaution, it's best to have the face mask with you all the time, as per health directives from the Ministry of Health.
Several measures have been put in place, including a ban on intercity travel, flights and suspension of learning in schools. However, implementing social distancing remains the biggest challenge so far. Police have since been deployed as part of measures to boost awareness.
Increasing awareness among the public is an important thing. We are on the streets today to warn our people on the dangers of the coronavirus. We are distributing the masks to all members of the public.
In a virtual meeting with the country's COVID-19 task force, President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo acknowledged his country's inability to tackle the pandemic. The Somali leader is instead advocating for prevention as the first line of defense before an outbreak overwhelms Somalia's weak health system.
We never expected to confront this disease because of many factors, one of which is our weak health system, economy and insecurity. We all need each other in this fight. Let us show unity in the face of this pandemic.
Somalia has the second highest number of infections in the region after Djibouti, that has passed the 1,000 mark. It also has the highest death toll in the region, with concerns that the virus will claim more lives in the coming weeks unless locals comply with health directives. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has welcomed over 200 Cuban health professionals who are in the country to support efforts to curb the spread of COVID-19. The group landed on a chartered flight in Pretoria. South Africa is leading in the number of coronavirus infections on the continent. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
A chartered South African Airways plane carrying the Cuban doctors landed at the Waterkloof Air Force Base to a welcome from government officials from South Africa and Cuba. The health professionals from Cuba are here to bolster support in the fight against COVID-19. This follows a request by the South African government for assistance and medical personnel support to help this country in its efforts to deal with the spread of the coronavirus.
We're going to spread them throughout the country so that they can bolster the efforts that our really courageous health professionals and health workers are making in fighting this pandemic. So we are truly, truly elated and excited that the Cuban health workers are here.
The group consists of experts in the field of epidemiology, biostatistics, and public health, healthcare technology engineers, and experts to provide technical assistance.
The people of Cuba and the government of Cuba have been true comrades, brothers, sisters, and friends to South Africa. Not just to South Africa, but to the entire continent of Africa, particularly Southern Africa. We have, through this comradeship, built strong bilateral international relations with cooperation in a range of fields, including health, defense, human settlements, water and sanitation, and education. These men and women are to work alongside South African health professionals in our response to COVID-19.
There can be no more honorable mission than the one entrusted to you. Through your work, you will be saving lives of brothers and sisters in South Africa, and you should be proud of that. Acting together, South Africans and Cubans, COVID-19 will be defeated faster in South Africa.
The South Africa-Cuba Agreement on cooperation in the fields of public health and medical sciences has registered much success. Over 700 South Africans, many from previously disadvantaged communities, received their first 5 years of medical training in Cuba and have since qualified as doctors. Many others continue to receive medical training in Cuba. The health ministry has confirmed that before they departed from Cuba, the health workers were quarantined to ensure minimal risk of exposure to the virus. They're also being quarantined here for 14 days before they're being deployed to other parts of South Africa. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Senegal, over 800 cases of the coronavirus have been reported. 9 people have also died from the disease, prompting the government to adopt strict measures to curb the spread. This has affected vulnerable groups such as street children who are struggling to find shelter, assistance and food. CGTN's Chaum Gono reports.
Around 40,000 street children in Senegal are at risk since government declared a state of emergency over the COVID-19 epidemic in late March. The minors suffer from poor sanitation and drug usage, exposing them further to the disease. Social services are now increasing their capacity to accommodate them.
They live in precarious hygiene conditions, which increases the risk of contamination. They are not well informed about the health impacts, so they are at a high risk, and it is urgent to shelter them.
Since the start of the pandemic, the police have been mistreating us. They were slapping us. Then people from the village pilot told us it could be harder in the near future because there could be a complete confinement order and that no one would be able to go out day or night. So because of that, I decided to come here.
The homeless children are known as talibs, youth from Quranic schools who are forced to beg for money. Others come from broken families or have lost their homes because of poverty.
We go out to look for them almost every day. We have stopped doing these rounds at the normal times because of the current situation, whereby the government put in place measures due to the state of emergency, such as a curfew and a ban on public gatherings.
Some of the children staying at the centers left to return to Dakar, but were faced with a new reality.
They went back, but now they want to come back here again because they regret leaving. It's hard in Dakar. All the restaurants are closed. There's nothing left to eat. We also used to distribute food, but we stopped.
Life has always been difficult for the children, and with the expanding outbreak, they are now more vulnerable than ever. Chamrono, CGTN.
The head of the lab in the Chinese city of Wuhan, which has been accused of manufacturing the coronavirus, says such claims have no basis in fact. Yuan Shiming, professor at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the director of its National Biosafety Laboratory, added that there is still no conclusive answer as to where the disease originated. He said the institute had neither the intention nor the ability to design and construct a new coronavirus. You're watching Africa Live is still ahead on the program. In our special coverage of the coronavirus pandemic, we focus on the impact the crisis is having on the environment. And the leader of Libya's eastern-based National Army declares his forces will take over power in the North African nation.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, the measures taken by governments to control the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic have had far-reaching effects in all socio-economic sectors across the world. CGTN is airing a series of stories on how the outbreak has affected various segments of our society. And today we are focusing on the impact of the outbreak on the environment. Up to 90,000 informal recyclers operate around South Africa. However, they were forced to shut down when the lockdown kicked in, and it will be a long wait before they return to the streets. Since they're banned from waste picking, they have been struggling to survive. CGTN's Julie Shire filed this report.
It was a bitter pill to swallow for wastepreneur Godfrey Pakedi when he had no choice, when he closed his recycling site and asked more than 100 trash collectors to stay at home when South Africa went into lockdown.
Since then, experienced 5 weeks without any income or anything maybe you were relying in before. I think this 5 weeks was very tough.
Godfrey's army of trash collectors keep Johannesburg streets clean and prevent 80 tons of plastic, paper and cardboard from being dumped into landfills.
They are important to help us with the environment. Imagine when all this thing goes to the landfill. They are important. They are feeding their families. As you can see, we've got problem of job scarcity. It gives somebody a food on the table, like those who've got families, those who don't have luck, like by so to say, who are from maybe a poor family, and then it helps them a lot.
There are up to 90,000 trash collectors around South Africa. They collect and trade over 80% of discarded packaging and paper. The COVID-19 shutdown has robbed them of their livelihoods, and they're eager to start working again.
will have a training. The training is to give each and everyone a sanitizer, the gloves, the mask, so that when they go to the bin, you see the bin is being charged by everyone. So they have to sanitize the bin, firstly, and then put the mask and go on the bin. Then they must make it a point they wash their hands thoroughly. And then as you come, you'll see the social distance. We'll teach them about that.
Recyclers are not part of the industries going back to work when restrictions are lifted in May. Their return to the streets will depend very much on South Africa being able to flatten the COVID-19 curve. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Experts are raising concerns over the danger posed by used masks, gloves and other protective gear categorized as hazardous waste to the environment. Demand for personal protective equipment is at an all-time high as countries scramble to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports from Nairobi.
Millions of tons of hazardous medical waste is being churned out as the world moves to shield itself from COVID-19. Used masks have been disposed of like any other trash. But some individuals and retailers have been collecting and reselling these very masks to unsuspecting buyers, with potentially devastating health consequences. Properly disposing this waste is proving to be an even bigger headache.
I think it's good to think widely, because some of the masks that are going to be disposed of might end up to be serious more carriers or vectors compared to what we're currently experiencing.
We are educating our people on safe disposal. Of course, in the villages, we know it's a bit tricky, but we are urging people, maybe they can either burn or even throw it in their pit latrines.
Some institutions like this one in Machakos, Eastern Kenya, are ahead of the pack. This is an incinerator. This is where clinical waste ends up. But such equipment is not readily available for many health facilities, and so hazardous waste can end up in the normal traditional garbage dumps. Environmentalists say that the material from used masks can be recycled into other products.
If you pick up the mask and mix it with what you call PET, you can extrude it into something, depending on the mold that you have.
A number of governments in Africa have made it mandatory to wear a face mask in public. But few people realize that used masks are considered hazardous waste and must be disposed of properly. With COVID-19 cases on the rise, governments will be confronted with challenges that require prompt solutions as concerns grow over how to deal with the piling medical waste.
The impact of the coronavirus is both immediate and dreadful, but there is another deep emergency: the planet's unfolding environmental crisis. Scientists say biodiversity is in steep decline, and climate disruption is approaching a point of no return.
Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And still on environmental issues, Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital, is notorious for its massive traffic jams and air pollution. But following the COVID-19 pandemic, the city of 21 million has a different look and feel. Here is CGTN's Deji Badmus with that story.
This is the picture of Lagos everyone is used to. But this is what the city looks like now. Deserted roads, gone are the nightmare traffic jams, overcrowded streets, and the massive pollution that comes with it. This is thanks to the lockdown imposed on the city after several cases of COVID-19 were confirmed here. And these environmentalists says he can now breathe in fresh air.
Much as I don't want to celebrate it that much because it's affecting economic activities. People are not making money, jobs are being lost and the likes and things like that. People are not happy. But as an environmentalist, this is the kind of environment that I want. An environment that is peaceful, that is cool, that humans can live in, animals can live in without any form of disturbance, that everybody, wetlands are protected, and the likes. So I'm happy with this. This is the kind of environment I want. But then, as humans, we need to draw up lessons and reduce our energy use so that we can always have this kind of atmospheric situation all the time.
As well as being Nigeria's most populous city, Lagos is ranked among the most polluted cities in the world by the World Health Organization. Roads in the city are often jammed by vehicles releasing fumes into the air.
Vehicles move, emitting smoke without control, and nobody is carrying out enforcement to reduce this. We have that here. Vehicles that are not supposed to be on the road, they are moving right here. And production sites as well. We have so many cement companies around here that are always producing because people want to build, they produce cement and the likes. Now everything is on the halt.
And it's not just pollution from vehicles. The city is perhaps the noisiest in the country as well. Almost every street has at least a church and a mosque with loudspeakers mounted outside. But with the lockdown and restriction on religious gatherings, the speakers have since gone silent.
Even the number of industries that are using generators, all those diesels, powered engines, they are not making use of it. So that's what makes it fresher. And I think maybe once in a year, maybe a particular month, we should do that.
If you live in Lagos for this long, you understand that driving through Oshodi for the first time, no noise. The whole place is cleaner, fresher. You want more of this.
While environmentalists are happy with the quiet and serene atmosphere of the city at the moment, many of its residents are itching to go back to work and for things to return to what they were before the pandemic and the subsequent lockdown. Now that will inevitably happen, but it remains to be seen whether vital lessons on environmental protection would have been learned during this period. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Egypt has not been left behind as its partial lockdown has led to reduced transportation. With less traffic, the air is getting cleaner. Some regions have seen air pollutants drop by a third, which is the cleanest air quality the country has experienced in 2 decades. Here's CGTN's Adel Mahroui with that report.
Cairo is surrounded by massive industrial complexes. The Egyptian capital also has 40% of the vehicles in the country. And burning agriculture and house waste is quite common. That has led to a steep deterioration in air quality.
The main natural source of particle pollution in Egypt is the desert. The majority of the landscape in Egypt is desert. That leads to a continuous induction of particles in the air. It could be evident like in sandstorms, but it happens daily and is responsible for at least 40% of the particle pollution we spot.
Of all the 6 main air pollutants globally recognized, Egypt suffers from particle pollution the most. Recently, COVID-19 has eased Cairo's suffocation. It forced the government to keep millions at home, impose a night curfew, and shut commercial areas.
Each of these measures had a positive effect on air quality. When we studied the percentages of the pollutants in Cairo and the Delta region, which are the areas with the highest population density, we've discovered that there is a drop of up to 36% in particle pollution. This is not a small figure.
That's actually the best air quality Cairo had in 20 years.
Egypt has been in a critical level of air quality. Particle pollution exceeds the maximum legal limit for an accumulative period of 4 months every year. The country is now breathing better, thanks to the measure taken to face the pandemic. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's now look at other top stories across Africa. The leader of Libya's eastern-based Libyan National Army has declared that his forces will take over power in the North African nation. General Khalifa Haftar made the announcement on Monday, but did not give details on his political vision. Haftar also declared an end to the 2015 UN peace plan known as the Shirat Agreement. CGTN's Adel Mahroui has more from Cairo.
The commander of the Libyan National Army says he has assumed power in Libya. In a televised statement, Khalifa Haftar claims that Libyans have asked his LNA forces to lead the divided country. But until the speech was made, only few Libyan factions had published online statements endorsing Haftar.
وفي الوقت الذي نعبر فيه
We appreciate the people's delegation for this historic task under these exceptional circumstances and suspending the political agreement to become history. That is the decision of the Libyan people, the source of legitimacy. I announce the acceptance of the armed forces to this task.
Haftar says he'll work to establish institutions for a civilian state and vowed to continue his war to take over Tripoli. He has not given any further details. His announcement, however, sidelines the Tobruk-based parliament, the only elected entity in Libya.
There are negotiations ongoing now, which include many of those that belong to the government of national accord, and Haftar is expected to make an announcement this week to draw the political map. The Libyan parliament has been absent. The whole political weight has been led by General Haftar and the LNA. It might be time to give more representation for Libyan tribes.
The UN-backed government of national accord in Tripoli described Haftar's move as a coup against UN agreements and resolutions. The United States and the European Commission have condemned the step. Russia, on its part, says it's been surprised by the move.
With his self-declaration as ruler for Libya, Haftar has terminated recognition to the 2015 UN peace plan and all the following agreements, including the Berlin Conference, which the international and regional powers have all endorsed. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Nigeria's Lassa fever outbreak appears to be in remission. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control says the number of deaths from the virus has been reducing in recent weeks. CGTN's Deji Badmus has the details.
It's been 2 consecutive weeks now that the country has gone without recording any deaths from Lassa fever. And the number of cases, too, has been on a steady decline, with confirmed cases dropping from 81 in the first week of March to just 6 this past week. Now, while some health experts are attributing the drop in both the number of cases and deaths to rainfall in some parts of the country, Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, says it is the result of sustained response activities by emergency response centers set up in states across the country. But despite the drop in cases, Lassa fever still remains the most fatal disease Nigeria is dealing with. It's killed 188 persons this year alone. Health experts say it's encouraging that Lassa fever is now in remission, as this will allow health agencies to focus more on the fight against COVID-19 in the country. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, let's now go to Uche for a look at the day's business news. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's it, and coming up on Africa Live Biz today. Kenya's economy went up by 5.4% in 2019, missing growth estimates. And we'll tell you why Moody's has downgraded South Africa's agricultural funder, the Land Bank.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Kenya. The country's economic growth slowed last year, missing government estimates as delayed rains hit key sectors. Now, East Africa's largest economy expanded at a pace of 5.4% in 2019. That is down from 6.3% recorded in 2018. Now, agriculture, which makes up a third of Kenya's GDP, slowed to 3.6% in the 12-month period. Authorities say suppressed long rains disrupted the normal planting season in key agricultural zones. While rains have been good so far this year, agricultural exports such as flowers are expected to take a hit due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Now, the Kenyan government also projects that economic growth will slow to 2.5% this year, and analysts say this could even go as low as 1.8%. Now, Moody's recently downgraded South Africa's agricultural funder, Land Bank, to B1 on review for further downgrade. This was because of the company's failure to make payments of maturing credit facilities as well as debt. Moody's believes that this compromises the entity's standalone viability. CGTN's Angelo Coppola tells us more.
Despite this, Future Growth, an asset manager and a significant funder historically of the Land Bank, has announced that they will work with the bank to support them through this challenging period.
The Land Bank funds on average around 27% of agricultural debt in South Africa. So what that means is that 27% of the country's food supply, in essence, is reliant on the Land Bank functioning effectively. So actually dispersing loans to commercial and emerging farmers. The Land Bank not functioning correctly could result in food security risks, which could mean that we would need to import more food, and that poses very real risks to food inflation.
The sector has been used for political purposes in the past.
South Africa has historically some industries that have strong, obvious competitive advantages, and agriculture is one of them. And South Africa historically has treated agriculture as a political football. The legacy stretches back over 100 years and more.
There's a history of shareholder interference that has led to a short-term liquidity crisis, which the government must address.
The most immediate priority is a liquidity injection, which will allow the bank to continue lending to emerging and commercial farmers. And the second priority would be a recapitalization and a revisit of the bank's funding structure as well as operational structure.
The bank has three sources of funding: issuing of notes on capital markets, the private issuing of notes, and the banks.
Banks, by their habit, by their nature, have not been long-term funders of state-owned enterprises. So it would be unusual to see banks migrate to become long-term funders of the Land Bank as an SOE. But the issuing of notes and the floating of notes are very viable places to get long-term funding.
The bank is no stranger to management shake-ups, governance concerns, and malfeasance.
This time, we aren't unduly concerned about the ethical base of the Land Bank. It appears that the high levels of management turnover and relatively poor board oversight has really precipitated this liquidity crisis. We've done ongoing governance review work of the Land Bank, and at this time, it doesn't appear to be corruption or malfeasance that has precipitated this particular crisis.
It's important that the Land Bank stays in business because we need to ensure that there's food security and there isn't a shortage of any food, which could lead to riots. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And moving on now, remittances sent home by migrants from low and middle income nations are expected to drop by around 20% as the COVID-19 wrecks economic activity. According to a new study by the World Bank, global remittances could tumble by $142 billion this year to $445 billion. That is the sharpest fall in recent history. At the same time, remittances for sub-Saharan Africa are estimated to fall by 23.1% to $37 billion, with a slight recovery of 4% forecast for 2021. Now, Nigeria is the biggest target market for remittances in the region, having received about $23.8 billion in 2019. Ghana and Kenya are second and third at $3.5 billion and $2.8 billion, respectively. And as the coronavirus pandemic continues to dent economies, Nigeria's banking industry is amongst the worst hit. The sector heavily relies on revenues from oil, but banks now have been left vulnerable as global oil prices spiral downwards. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reporting.
Banking activities in the Nigerian capital almost grind to a halt. But for a few skeletal services, the industry is facing one of its worst times in history. Already, a huge chunk of money has left the banks with the central bank's decision to increase the loan-to-deposit ratio to 65% last year in order to improve lending. The problem is exacerbated by the slump in global crude oil prices and a lockdown caused by the coronavirus pandemic.
The monetary system, the policies and structure is in circle.
government spends, it flows into the banking sector picks up this fund, disbursed out to businesses and individuals who need them. The businesses and individuals utilize these funds, return savings and interest and all of it back to the banking system, and like that it circles. But as the situation as it is now, that is stagnant. They also depend on returns from businesses and savings from both businesses and individuals to function. Now, with the current situation on ground, where we have seen most of the businesses closed down, then it is difficult for people and businesses to save, which means that the live stream for the banking sector also is affected, and as such, its ability to function and operate effectively will be hampered.
Crude oil is Nigeria's mainstay, accounting for nearly 90% of its foreign earnings. With limited local production, limited foreign exchange earnings, and a depleted excess crude account, a downward spiral is inevitable for Nigeria's economy.
There is no way we can boost the local economy with the current limited foreign exchange earning. And we should also remember the fact that we depend on high importation of consumables, even from China, which constitutes 25% of our imports, which means that will create an artificial inflation. I mean, not even artificial, real-time inflation in Nigeria, because cost of production from where we are importing will be higher or will go up significantly, and then it will affect us locally.
By the end of September 2019, the top 5 banks in Nigeria had generated a profit of $1.34 billion, much more than the $1.23 billion achieved the previous year. But without a viable economy, experts envisage a massive decline this year. They advise the way out could be to boost local production and fully diversify Nigeria's oil-dependent economy. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And staying with the coronavirus impact, Tunisia's tourism sector could lose up to $1.4 billion and nearly 500,000 jobs this year. Authorities there say the sector is going through one of the most drastic hits in history, with flights, cruises, hotels and a web of businesses still left struggling. From Tunisia, CGTN's Adnan Shaushi.
The village of Sidi Bou Said is one of the pearls of the Mediterranean basin and the first tourist destination in the capital city Tunis. Many European cruise ships usually bring tens of thousands of tourists to the port of La Goulette several times per week during this period of year. But now that maritime and air transport are suspended, this tourist spot remains empty.
The central bank says that the loss in income is estimated at $1.4 billion. The whole sector represents around $3 billion in annual revenue. Losing 50% or more has caused huge losses. The impact is on direct and indirect jobs, as there are no bookings.
The Tunisian General Labor Union asserts that over 400,000 workers in the tourism industry could lose their jobs. This number could rise to 700,000 people because the sector employs over 300,000 indirect workers who are active in parallel activities and businesses. Only the salaries of March and April have been guaranteed so far.
This agreement concerns the salaries of employees and workers in the tourist sector and hotels. It is the minimum. It's not full salary. Only 65% of the salary is paid with the government help of around $70. All hotels are closed and the damage to tourism is unprecedented.
The Minister of Tourism is working closely with the COVID-19 task force and the tourism professionals to adapt thousands of hotels and tourist circuits to the new prevention and sanitary measures.
We're working on a sanitary protocol with the health ministry and professionals. German authorities may soon allow their citizens to travel to North Africa. We must get ready to resume partial activity if there's no threat or risk to lives.
People here believe that Sidi Bou Said and all tourist destinations across Tunisia will remain empty for months. Tourism players say their sector has been devastated by the coronavirus pandemic.
Tourism is the main pillar of the Tunisian economy since the 1960s. In 2015, millions of European tourists deserted the country following a wave of terrorist attacks, but the sector recovered quickly. Now with zero bookings, flights and cruise ships, and with closed borders for Algerian tourists, the 2020 season could be the worst in over 5 decades. Aden Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll be looking at Zimbabwe's worsening food crisis. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, it is back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you coming up in your sports. Tunisia's Football Federation commits the national team's modern center to host hundreds of COVID-19 patients.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start off your sport in North Africa, where the Tunisian Football Federation has committed the national team's modern center to hosting hundreds of COVID-19 patients and quarantined people while providing free food, medical assistance, transport and communications. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi brings us more.
Officials at the Tunisian Football Federation believe in the social responsibility of all sports structures in the battle against the pandemic.
The Tunisian Football Federation has stepped up efforts to support the state in the fight against coronavirus. The federation is providing direct financial assistance, disinfected buses to transport quarantined people, and all the necessary medical equipment.
The Football Federation has also made its center available to the Ministry of Health and the COVID-19 crisis unit. The doctors who usually treat professional footballers are now providing medical care to quarantined individuals.
The Football Federation has provided well-equipped hotel rooms, protection gears, masks, hand sanitizers, disinfectants, as well as food, internet and medical assistance to patients.
A competent medical staff has trained volunteers on managing the quarantine center during the period of general lockdown.
Together, we can win this battle against coronavirus. Volunteering in this crucial period is a national duty. The Football Federation will not hesitate to help and provide any assistance.
The Tunisian football authorities will offer help to football clubs facing financial difficulties after the suspension of all activities since the outbreak of the pandemic.
The Tunisian Football Federation will provide food and donations to over 700 families in 24 regions across the country. Many sports federations have followed the football officials' push for solidarity in this period to save lives and to help people affected by the COVID-19 economic and social crisis. Aden Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The resumption of football after the coronavirus pandemic has been a big discussion worldwide. Several European leagues have seen a winner declared before completion, while others have cancelled their competitions. In Africa, the debate continues on what will be the conclusion for the different domestic leagues and the CAF inter-club competitions. Last month, CAF also made the decision to postpone all qualifiers for international tournaments following the growing concerns over COVID-19. AFCON 2021 qualifiers, the FIFA Women's Under-20, the World Cup qualifiers and the Women's AFCON 2020 qualifiers were some of the competitions put on hold. The African Championship of Nations that was due to be held in Cameroon was also postponed.
CAF will need to prioritize, but also take sacrifices because we have the CHAN finals that have not happened. If they have not happened, you have the Africa Cup of Nations and the World Cup, rather the Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers and the World Cup qualifiers. We're already in the middle of this, so they will need to find a way of how they adjust their calendars because now Africa Cup of Nations and World Cup, those are priorities. You look at the CHAN and it's probably a lesser tournament. You're finding a situation where they will have to sacrifice it, or if they can adjust their calendar and it fits in, they will have to fix it there.
There's no sporting event and there's no football happening in Africa, so that means there are lots of people that have been denied an income, and it's also going to test the financial stability of most sports institutions, especially clubs, where obviously we know that the resources are meager. It's going to be a very big test, but will they even be able to survive after the crisis?
The 2020 African Nations Championships that was due to conclude last weekend remains the biggest sporting casualty of the coronavirus pandemic on the continent thus far. Football fans in Senegal have voiced their opinion on the effect of the pandemic has had on their favorite sport.
We are looking forward to it all starting up again because everything is so bleak right now. We don't have any games at home and we can't watch foreign games on TV either. Imagine, for some time now, we haven't been watching the African Championship games because of COVID-19. We don't like it, but we can't help it. We pray to the good Lord that the pandemic will stop as soon as possible and that the championship will resume properly.
This suspension has affected me a lot as a fan and I miss it. The decision to suspend was imposed because of COVID-19, but it does not change the fact that we miss the championship. It will inevitably lead to a loss of earnings in the various leagues. It's annoying and boring.
It is very hard for me as a player to see the African Championship stop because of COVID-19. On the one hand, I would say it's a good thing right now that it's to prevent the spread of this pandemic because we're in a continent where we don't have a lot of resources to fight this disease. On the other hand, you should know that it is very difficult for us footballers and even for African football fans to stay without playing or at least watching matches on television. As far as the suspended calendars are concerned, I wonder how we will make up for all these upcoming matches when the suspension is lifted.
The 2019-2020 French football